What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. So I have been grinding to get all the data for the Cold War weapons in Warzone. It's been very, very tedious and very unfun to do, but gotta do what you gotta do to get the data. So I've finished the MAC-10 Bullfrog and Cold War MP5, measuring all the attachment stats for all of those guns. So today's video is going to be kind of on the state of the meta and what I think is viable right now, and I'll go through all the different playstyles of SMGs and give recommended weapons and recommended builds for all of those. So I think it's going to be a pretty good video, so stick around and we will get into it. So the first thing I want to talk about is basically just the weird things I found when testing all these attachments. So I'm going to start with barrels. So the barrels actually pretty much matched their descriptions for what they do, but there's only one barrel that you can really recommend based on all this data that I've collected. So for every SMG, the Task Force barrel has a significant 50% increase in range. Roughly, they were all right around that. And the rifled and reinforced heavy were both very minimal. So this is MAC-10 that we're looking at right now. And if you scroll over to the bullet velocity, you can see that it still gives you 80% bullet velocity. So yeah, the other two give you a little more bullet velocity, but with an SMG, you don't necessarily need that crazy bullet velocity. So I also found that the Task Force barrel did not increase recoil whatsoever, even though it says it does. I'll show a screenshot here on the screen for you. But it literally did not change the recoil whatsoever. Gave by far the biggest increase in range. 50% is huge. And then also gave a good bullet velocity increase. So there's no question you need to use the Task Force barrel on every single Cold War SMG. So this is still the MAC-10 that we're looking at here. Another interesting thing I found, agency suppressor does increase range just like the monolithic, about 10%. But I also found that it helps with recoil a little bit. So I did this test over and over, and pretty much repeatedly it was about 10% reduction in recoil. So that adds another reason to use the agency suppressor. Interesting thing also about the agency suppressor, it had no effect on bullet velocity. See, the bullet velocity is 0. I tested this on all 3 SMGs, and it had no effect whatsoever on bullet velocity. The last thing I want to talk about real quick for the weird things I found, which some people already know this kind of stuff, but the ADS grips, so the speed tape, jungle grip, serpent wrap, and airborne elastic wrap, at least on the MAC-10, either did so little or actually did nothing to the point where I didn't see any change at 240 FPS. And again, I'm not even testing at 240 FPS. I can't get that in Warzone. So I'm testing it around 180 FPS. So there's going to be, plus or minus 4 milliseconds or so of error in here because that's one frame at 240. So yeah, plus or minus 4 to 8 milliseconds probably on the numbers you see on the Cold War weapons, just because I can't hit 240 FPS. So the data is not going to be perfect, but it's pretty good, And then they still do hurt tactical sprint to fire time by a little bit, but it's like 4 milliseconds. Again, that's like in my margin for error. So I don't know if they're actually doing anything at all. They're just kind of pointless on the MAC-10 right now. So this is the rear grip for the Bullfrog, and it was similar for the Cold War MP5. You can see they actually did do something here when I tested. So they did hurt your sprint to fire, and they actually helped with ADS a little bit, but the ADS help is so minimal that I'm not sure I would recommend using these grips. If you have a free slot maybe and you don't care about sprint to fire time, then maybe you can use one, or you could just use a speed tape if you don't want to worry about sprint to fire time. But it's just strange that they don't help with ADS. That's one of the things that makes it so hard to use Cold War guns, is we have no way to reduce the ADS times whatsoever. Also, a lot of the attachments don't increase ADS times, so it kind of balances that out a little bit, but we're just missing some attachments that we need to make Cold War ARs viable, but I digress. That's not the topic of the video. Alright, I'm just going to talk a little bit now about SMGs in general and the 5 that I think are viable and why I think those 5 are viable. So when you're using an SMG, you're like really up in people's faces almost all the time. Not always, but most of the time you're within 20 meters. So at that range, accuracy is less important than it would be at 100 meters. Obviously at 100 meters, accuracy is going to be king because your effective TTK is going to be way better if you're hitting all your shots. So as far as SMGs go, I think TTK is a very, very important number. So I'm going to focus a lot on TTK in this video, but That's why these 5 SMGs I think are the 5 that are viable right now, because they pretty much have the 5 best TTKs. And there's some all-rounders in there too, but we'll talk about that as we get into individual categories. But just starting out, you can see the Cold War MP5. This is chest shots, 250 health. Cold War MP5 wins by a pretty big margin on TTK, followed by the Modern Warfare MP5, which has slightly more range, but almost none. I mean, it's almost the same. And then the Mac 10, which has the most range. This is including the open bolt delay on the Mac 10, so in my opinion, you need to include that for SMGs because the situations where you both see each other at the same time is the situation where you need the best TTK. And if you both see each other at the same time, you both pull the trigger at the same time, the Mac 10 is going to fire 50 milliseconds later than any other SMG. So it's something that needs to be included in the time to kill, in my opinion. I know some people turn it off, but... and then the next up after the Mac 10 is the Bullfrog, which has a pretty solid TTK as well. And then it has a little bit more range than the MP7. MP7 is slightly slower than the Mac 10 again. This is chest shots. So let's jump over and look at extremity shots now. So on extremity shots, the number 1 is, again, the Cold War MP5. That's a trend. The Cold War MP5 kills the fastest of all the SMGs, followed by the Modern Warfare MP5, followed by the Bullfrog, followed by the Mac 10, and followed by the MP7. So similar trend there. Let's look at headshots real quick. Headshots is interesting. So on headshots, the Bullfrog kills the fastest by far. The Bullfrog has an insanely fast time to kill on headshots. That is followed up by the Cold War MP5, which is slightly faster than the Modern Warfare MP5, which is also kind of tied with the MP7. And then the Mac 10 actually has a very slow head TTK now. So if you're somebody that aims for the head, you hit a lot of headshots, the Bullfrog probably is going to be the gun for you. But we'll talk more about these individual things. I just wanted to kind of give an overview of these guns and their TTKs and how they rank. All right, so the first category I'm going to talk about is which SMGs are the best for just absolutely rushing into a building, super close quarters, just getting in people's faces and just frying them as fast as you can. And in that situation, TTK is really, really king, like I've talked about before. Like that's super, super important in that situation because your accuracy doesn't matter that much. You're going to just be, you're going to be so close to them that even if you have an inaccurate gun, you should be able to hit them. So in that case, there's 2 different guns for 2 different types of rushing that I'd recommend. The first would be the Modern Warfare, the first would be the Cold War MP5 for ADS rushing. So if you're going to ADS when you go into a building, then you'd want to use the Cold War MP5, and that's just because it kills so fast. So this is the build that I would recommend for the Cold War MP5 for just the absolute rushing the building. So first of all, I choose I believe it's the 4th magazine, because you get the 50 rounds and it doesn't hurt your ADS nearly as much as the last magazine, which ADS time is something we have an issue with on Cold War guns simply because we don't have any attachments to reduce ADS time. So you have to be careful with stacking ADS increasing attachments with Cold War guns. Task Force barrel's a no-brainer on every Cold War SMG, like I said at the start of the video, and that's because it has a huge range boost, huge bullet velocity boost, and basically no downsides. It doesn't actually increase recoil like it says it does. So 100% Task Force barrel on all Cold War SMGs. So I also added the 5 milliwatt laser sight, and that's just because in some situations you're still going to want to hipfire. You're still going to want to hipfire the gun. Somebody's really close to you, you definitely still want to have decent hipfire. You could, if you don't want to hipfire at all with this build, because it's not really what the build's about, you could take this off and maybe put an optic on, or potentially put one of those grips that reduces ADS on a little bit. Even though they don't do very much, they will still help. And then if you did do the grip, so if you replaced this laser with a rear grip like the serpent wrap, then because that serpent wrap increases your sprint to fire time, you would want to probably swap the stock out for something that helps with sprint to fire time. So probably no stock or Raider stock if you want the ADS movement speed. So obviously if you did this build with a Raider stock, you can't hipfire this gun. Like, this is not going to be a hipfire build at all. But those are 2 pretty solid Cold War MP5 builds that you could use if you were rushing buildings. Again, it has a bigger mag than the Modern Warfare MP5, kills faster than the Modern Warfare MP5. It's the fastest killing SMG in the game, so that's why I think it's a little underused. And with this Task Force barrel, let's go to the comparison here. If you look at the TTK chart, I've got the Cold War MP5 and Modern Warfare MP5 built here. Cold War MP5 kills significantly faster, and with the Task Force barrel has much more range. So it's definitely the gun to use if you're going to be sprinting into buildings trying to, fry people inside 10 or 15 meters. It has a lot of that weird vertical recoil, and then the pattern just stops after like 25 bullets or something, which is strange. But again, up close, I just don't think that matters very much. I think you're going to be able to control that recoil. It's perfectly vertical, so there is a lot of it, but you're inside 15 meters, so it doesn't really matter that much. So the other build that I would recommend for a highly pushing, rushing into buildings gun would be the Modern Warfare MP5, and this I would recommend using if you are looking to hipfire a lot. If you're someone that really likes to hipfire, then you're going to want to use the Modern Warfare gun, because right now the Cold War guns just can't match the hipfire of Modern Warfare guns. They just don't have enough attachments to do that. So with Modern Warfare guns, we have the Merc foregrip, the no stock, or in this case the FTAC collapsible, and the 5 mW laser, which all help hipfire, whereas the Cold War guns only hurt hipfire, so except the 5 mW laser. So I know JGod put out a video a while back about the no stock helping. I tested the no stock, and I think it's been patched, because it definitely does not help. It hurts your hipfire now on the 3 guns I tested it on. But anyway, back to the MP5 for rushing. So Modern Warfare MP5, Merc foregrip, sleight of hand, F-Tank collapsible, 5 mW laser, 45 round mag. This is pretty basic. People have been using this for a long time. You could swap out sleight of hand for a suppressor or monolithic integral suppressor if you wanted to be silenced, but this has great hipfire, fantastic TTK, and you can fry people with hipfire with this build. So this would be my recommendation for if you want to rush buildings and use hipfire. All right, next category is kind of all-around SMG, so something that kills fast up close but is still reliable and accurate at range. So for this category, I think there's 2 fantastic options right now, both the MAC-10 and the Bullfrog. So these are my recommended builds probably for the all-around version of the gun. So with the MAC-10, I do Task Force barrel again, always Task Force barrel. Field Agent grip keeps the horizontal bounce down, keeps the vertical recoil down a little bit. The 4th magazine, again, the biggest magazine, but not the fast mag version of the biggest magazine, because in most of the cases it doesn't do anything to use the fast mag, and it just really penalizes your ADS. So I would go with this mag. And then 5 mW laser, I like to have that. I know a lot of people don't use this, but I really like to have the ability to hip fire if I need to. Situations where someone's right next to you, 5 meters and in. I feel like hip firing is probably the best option in those situations. So I like to have the 5 mW if I can afford to have it on the build. And then wire stocks just to get that sprint to fire time down, because the MAC-10 has an open bolt delay. That effectively makes the sprint to fire time like higher, because you have 117 millisecond SMG sprint to fire time, but then it also takes an extra 50 milliseconds for the MAC-10 to fire. So I feel like it's important to have your sprint to fire time down on the MAC-10 specifically because of that open bolt delay. And then for the Bullfrog, you can get away with a lot of different builds. I like just the first magazine, the 65 round mag. It does not penalize your reload time. Gives you a gigantic magazine. Like compared to the MAC-10, you get an extra 12 bullets, and the Bullfrog does more damage per bullet. So the damage per mag of the Bullfrog is gonna be way higher than the MAC-10 for these 2 builds, like significantly higher. We are bringing that feature back to the website. It's just not there right now, but yeah, damage per mag is going to come back eventually. And then again, 5 mW laser. I like 5 mW laser, like I said about the MAC-10, just because I feel like sometimes you need to hip fire. Task Force barrel always for SMGs, Cold War SMGs. Grew suppressor just to be suppressed, and because you can kind of get away with it on the Bullfrog compared to other guns. Because you just don't, there's not that many attachments you need on the Bullfrog. The thing is a laser, it doesn't need an underbarrel. Both these guns are incredibly accurate. I would actually give the edge to the Bullfrog in terms of accuracy, though. I think the Bullfrog's massively slept on right now. So this is only 4 attachments For your fifth, if you're going to be using it as an all-around gun and have it a little longer range, I would probably put an optic on it because it doesn't have the best irons. That's one advantage that the MAC-10 does have is better iron sights. But then as far as stats go, obviously Bullfrog shoots way slower, but that's not always a bad thing. Obviously, shooting faster is kind of one of those intangible benefits where you're gonna get more flinched on your enemy. You're gonna land more shots. But the Bullfrog shooting slower means that with a 65 round magazine, the damage, like I was talking about, the damage per mag is huge on the Bullfrog compared to the MAC-10. So you can wipe 3 guys with a Bullfrog, where you're lucky to get maybe 2 with a MAC-10. ADS times are very similar with these two builds. Range modifier, because I have the agency suppressor on the Bullfrog, has a little bit extra range modifier, but we'll look at the TTK chart in a second. ADS times, very similar. Sprint to fire times, Bullfrog wins, even though I have the sprint to fire stock on the MAC-10, and that's just again because of the open bolt delay. Movement speed, the MAC-10 has incredible movement speed. The MAC-10 is definitely the movement king. We'll be talking about that more later on, but yeah, the MAC-10 has much better movement than the Bullfrog. Hipfire is the same because they both start with generic SMG Hipfire, and then they both have the 5 milliwatt, which reduces it the same. Bullet velocity is going to be higher on the Bullfrog because of the agency suppressor and because it starts higher than the MAC-10. The default value is higher. Reload time is a little bit worse on the Bullfrog, but that doesn't matter because you have a gigantic mag. But let's jump over to TTK charts. So start with, I'm just going to go head, chest, stomach, extremities, and compare. So with these two builds, Bullfrog is pink, MAC-10 is orange, and the Bullfrog, obviously, in headshots, has one of the fastest TTKs in the game, and with the MAC-10 nerf to headshots, the TTK is significantly worse than it used to be. So if you hit headshots, the Bullfrog is 10,000 times better than the MAC-10 in that first damage drop off. They get pretty close out towards the end, but not even sure that's really worth talking about. Chest shots, again, this is including that open bolt delay. As I've mentioned, I feel like you need to with SMGs inside that first damage range at least. But they're very close, actually. People are definitely sleeping on the Bullfrog. It kills almost as fast as the MAC-10, all the way out to that same distance with this build, 23 meters, which is a super long distance for a first damage drop off for SMGs. Let's go stomach. Stomach's going to be the same because they're SMGs, so chest and stomach have the same damage values. And then extremities. Extremities, the Bullfrog actually takes the lead. It actually kills a little bit faster in that first damage range than the MAC-10. But you can see out at range, if you're shooting people, 25, 30 meters out there, the MAC-10 is going to win that just based on damage values. Same with chest and extremity and stomach. So basically, Bullfrog's better if you hit legs or arms. Bullfrog's better if you hit headshots. And Bullfrog's almost the same with chest and stomach inside that first damage drop off. So I definitely think the Bullfrog is slept on right now. I'd check it out if I were you. I think it's a very underrated gun right now. All right, a quick honorable mention for the all-rounders is going to be the MP7. So MP7 doesn't kill as fast as these new guns, and it drops off much sooner. So you get an extra 5 to 8 meters of range with the Bullfrog and the MAC in the first damage drop off. So I do think the MAC and the Bullfrog are better options. But the MP7 is an absolute laser, as everyone knows. And now that we know these new damage profiles that are in Warzone, it actually has a good TTK out at range too. So it's a very good all-around gun. And because it's a Modern Warfare gun, you can get the Hipfire down if you want to. So you can kind of build a hybrid Hipfire all-rounder. That's kind of what I did here. So I have monolithic, recon barrel, 5 milliwatt laser, Merc foregrip, 60 round mag. So this would be good at hip firing. You've got 2 of the 3 hipfire attachments, and we're not using the longest barrel. Oh, maybe I am using the longest barrel. I think I meant to pick strike barrel here. But there's one barrel on the MP7 that increases damage range but doesn't hurt your hipfire. So that's the barrel you should choose if you want to build this all-around long range and hipfire version of the MP7. I just think it's definitely still a solid gun. I'm not sure that it can compete with the MAC and the Bullfrog overall, but still a very good gun. So while we're on the topic of the MP7, just to finish up here, the MP7 has the smallest hipfire of any gun in the game. So if you are, again, someone who loves to hipfire, MP5 for Modern Warfare and MP7 would be your 2 best bets. MP5 kills faster, but MP7 has better hipfire. So you can see 2.24 kilopixels squared, and then 1.64 kilopixels squared for the MP7. So MP7 is a little smaller and it shoots faster, so it's gonna be flinching people more. Um, it's not it's not maybe the best option still, just because it doesn't kill quite as fast. And like I've talked about, TTK up close is paramount with these SMGs. So it's up to you, but I wanted to mention that these both have the best hipfire in the game. MP7's a little bit better, but again, they're going to be better than the Cold War guns. All right, the last thing I wanted to talk about was just the Mac 10 and how crazy fast movement speed it has. So MP7 was probably, I think it was the second place gun before behind the Uzi, but the Uzi doesn't have the TTK to be used really up close as an SMG. So comparing the Mac 10 to the MP7, because those are really the only two like viable, fast killing, high movement speed SMGs, you can see the Mac 10 on the left here has quite a bit faster than the MP7, and it has faster ADS movement speed. So if you're all about movement and movement is crazy important to you, which it should be. I mean, movement and mobility is hugely important when you're up close and sprinting around corners and things. The Mac 10 is going to be the way to go for that. So yeah, just wanted to mention that before I go to the summary. All right, so a quick summary of everything I just went over. I think there's 5 SMGs that are pretty viable right now. There's 3 that are really viable, 4 that are really viable, and then 1 that's kind of viable. So you're purely rushing into buildings and you want to ADS, Cold War MP5. You're purely rushing into buildings and you want to hipfire, Modern Warfare MP5. If you want an all-arounder it's good up close, good at range, really accurate everywhere, Mac 10, Bullfrog are both great for that. Fantastic. They trade blows in TTK, and Mac 10 has better movement, so that's what you'd have to think about in terms of those two. But Bullfrog comes with that big mag, comes with a high damage output per magazine. If you want an all-rounder with hipfire, then the MP7 is the way to go. And then if you just want pure hipfire, MP7 has the smallest hipfire in the game, followed by the Modern Warfare MP5. And then best mobility, like I just talked about, is the Mac 10. So those are kind of the things to think about when you're building an SMG. I hope you guys found this useful. All the data is up on the site now, so you can go play with these builds yourselves and find out what builds you like. I recommended some, but definitely use the website and find stuff that you like as well. Yeah, thank you guys for all the support, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.